So what is it? Bharat that is India or India that is Bharat?
Namaste. So thanks to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to engage with members of Nashik. I think this is not my first visit to the city. I have relatives in the city. I've been here 5 years ago. I've come here to attend a wedding. In fact, I was supposed to attend a wedding last night. I couldn't. I hope I don't sound incoherent despite the travel schedule. I'll try and make the most of this opportunity. So when India that is Bharat was launched, and I've told Shefali ji also, we are not going to sell my books here, so rest assured, after this we won't talk about my books. So people said, why didn't you call it Bharat that is India? I don't know whether grammatically I am poor or people don't make sense of it. India that is Bharat would mean the core identity of India is Bharat. You do it the other way around, Bharat that is India, it's the exact opposite of what we are trying to say. Okay? So perhaps the better way to understand it is from the Hindi Anvad, which says India Arthat Bharat, which means there is no astitva of India as any political entity or a state entity without the civilizational entity called Bharat. And that is the primary, let's say, idea that I'm trying to convey. Second, I think it's one thing to simply think of it as a semantic difference or as some kind of wordplay. But the second thing is you go a bit deeper and you ask yourself, what does it really translate to? What do you mean when you say that the core identity of India is Bharat? I'm known for indulging in blunt speak, so I hope I don't offend any sentiments. But as I keep saying, if I do, I'm happy that I've offended sentiments, because I think it's time to prick those bubbles on all sides possible. And as much as possible, we should, I think, upset the established order, to quote the Joker from The Dark Knight. So as far as I'm concerned, when I say that the core identity of India is Bharat, I'm not speaking in a nationalistic tone. I'm not speaking with reference to a cultural identity or a civilizational identity. Increasingly, I'm bluntly saying that I'm speaking of a religious identity, Hinduism, period. That's it. I don't wish to beat around the bush. That if the Hindu identity is removed from the calculus of Bharat or India, then India will no more remain recognizable, and it would have severed its roots from its civilizational past, from its spiritual past, and its religious past. So I don't see the point in beating around the bush, and the reason why this becomes crucial is because increasingly we are being told, even by guardians of Hinduism, that when you say Rashtra Sarvopari, what is the conception of that Rashtra? What is the identity of that Rashtra? If tomorrow it becomes a non-Hindu Rashtra, it would still remain a Rashtra, and all of us would be expected to be patriotic to that particular Rashtra. Is that something that we are comfortable living with, or is that the exact reason for the need for Hindutva as a concept? The idea is to preserve what has emanated from this land, what has been passed over to us by our ancestors for thousands of years. And if that is the case, there is no need to dilute that core message to reach out to those people who are uncomfortable with the message. See, there are two ways in which you market a particular idea, according to me. One, don't dilute the core, but convey it better, articulate it better, so that its reach is better. The other strategy is that you dilute the core to such an extent that it becomes agreeable to everyone. If you believe that any idea is going to be acceptable to all sections of society at all points of time, then fundamentally you fail to understand human psychology. You can never please everyone all the time. There will always be detractors and dissenters who have a problem with anything that you present. I say this from my experience in terms of finding detractors and dissenters to my positions, not from the left, but from the non-left also. So why should I dilute the core message? Because once you start diluting the core message, saying, oh, this particular section of the audience has a problem with this idea, so let me either shut up or let me dilute the message, where does that stop? It is a slippery slope. Then what is the difference between political appeasement of a section of the society and civilizational appeasement of a section of the society? I would say civilizational appeasement is even worse and disastrous and dangerous, because that is the one place where you expect absolute honesty in terms of what you stand for, so that there is no room for negotiation. There is no room for bargaining whatsoever. There is no room for any kind of wielding or change. If change has to come, it must come from the other side, not from you. This is my fundamental nature, and this is also the training of a lawyer speaking in terms of a negotiation. You don't start with the idea of compromise when you sit at a negotiating table. You don't give up your position unless and until the other side blinks. It is a staring contest, and it's not just a staring contest for the purposes of ego satisfaction. There is a lot at stake in this contest. You dilute your position, it has cascading effects and domino effects for everyone who's hoping that you will not blink in this fight. Those who think that you're standing in the way of what is coming our way, if they think that you've already started dithering and wavering, then who is going to protect us? I am never going to put my faith in any government-based entity. I have never put faith in the state, and as someone who has practiced law for 14 years, and I've seen how these games play themselves out in different judicial fora, I am absolutely clear about the fact that those who are actively in the race for power must be kept in power, because perhaps we don't have any other option. But you should never, ever, ever put all your eggs in the political basket. And that means you must keep your plan B ready, which is the cultural basket. And if that cultural basket suddenly has self-doubt, oh, what is the meaning of Hinduism? Everybody born here is a Hindu. That was true at a time when there were no Abrahamic faith systems here. That was true at a point when you define Hinduism as something that is indigenous to this land, knowing fully well that these, let's say, these strains of thought, these faith systems, have managed to assimilate themselves into the dharmic fold. But if you are going to apply the very same definition and logic, knowing fully well that not only foreign faith systems, but diametrically opposite faith systems. I don't have a problem with a foreign faith system, because having a problem with a foreign faith system would mean it is plain and simple xenophobia and prejudice. There is no basis for it. It's just irrational hatred. But if I say X and you say anti-X, then surely there is an existential problem in terms of coexistence. When faced with that, and you almost enjoy the same relationship of a predator and a prey, and this is not a relationship whose dynamic you have defined or dictated, it has been imposed on you, you will still continue saying, "Jo bhi yahan pe paida hua wo Hindu hai." As a lawyer, I'd sit and wonder, what do I do now? The basics of an argument have been diluted completely. You don't have any red line position where you say, I will not move an inch beyond this, or I will not concede this position. आपने non-negotiables को भी पूरी तरह से dilute कर दिया. Then what do? That is exactly why the exercise of defining Bharat had become necessary in writing, to say what are our red lines, and which we will not allow even the so-called guardians of our faith systems to compromise on under any circumstances. So there is a philosophy both in Hindu law as well as which is accepted in courts. The Murti or the Vigraha in every temple, the guardian of that Murti is the Purohit first. But if the Purohit starts compromising on the interests of the deity, then the bhaktas will take over. Just as when the directors of the company start compromising on the interests of the company and they compromise on their fiduciary duty, the shareholders will take over, they'll have to reconstitute the management. That philosophy works across the board. So if the guardians of Hinduism or Hindutva compromise on Hindutva or Hinduism, then it is time to basically tell them, you are here to represent us. And if that position is compromised, then we will have to start looking for other options. And that's why it is very crucial to ask yourself this very basic fundamental question. What is your allegiance to? Organization or cause or your faith? Is it to dharma or to organizations? Unless and until this priority is clear, you will always be swayed by symbolism and tokenism as opposed to asking, tumne kiya kya? That's the blunt question at the end of the day in terms of assessing balance, the balance sheet, profit loss. I will go ruthlessly on that. To initiate the conversation, it was necessary to ask, when did the silsila of compromise start? When did this skida of compromise set into the Hindu consciousness? At what point did it set in? When the other person is so rigid, so clear, is it let's say, a defining trait of the faith system? Or is it something that they have learnt as a product of history? And is the constant mode of compromise endemic to the Hindu consciousness? I needed to ask this question. So when I released both the books, people on this side thought, oh, this is an anti-Congress book. I said, no. You are reading it that way because you have already thought that I will write only on these lines. I said, no, just as there is Hindutva, I would say there is a Congressatva. Okay. So this is against the mentality of the Congress, which is, like I said, a spirit that can jump from one organization to another organization. It's a pretatma. Okay? So the question is, in whose body has that pretatma jumped into at this point? So to answer that question, I said, these are the traits of the pretatma that I see from its beginning. Now I leave it to the audience. Now ask yourself whether these traits have moved to any other organization. Because it's easy to make this a political discussion and keep talking about Nehru and Gandhi constantly. 100% hold them accountable. Don't let anybody deify them, no problem. But don't let anybody else make the same mistakes in your lifetime. Then you will be held responsible by future generations. That's it.
So it is very clear that the Hindutva, or the essence of being Hindu, is the civilizational core that has held this land together for thousands of years. And as you have said, all our philosophies that Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudi Vadanti were valid when they were panths, when they were Indic faiths, because it made sense at that point of time. But when a very predatory, very exclusivist, very rigid philosophy basically came into India as a cannibal and started preying on the people, then that same logic basically goes out of the window, and you're talking about Hindutva as a philosophy that we need to defend. I will come back to your point and ask you that pointed question. When did this endemic thing of giving way or ceding positions to other people, to other faiths, to other doctrines start amongst Hindus? We were not always like this.
See, I don't think this can be traced to the Islamic period, because you responded in kind. The one thing that, and you can see the parallels in that, so allow me to just build this argument in a slightly different way. The West is still dealing with the jihadi mindset at the level of politics and geopolitics. It has not been able to wrap its head around the fundamental theology that drives the mindset. Now the West is advanced, that's a given. It is the fount of all wisdom, that's a given. Okay. And still it is suffering at Shatrubodh. We suffered from the very same problems for close to, according to me, 300 to 400 years. Because I think the shock of dealing with someone who doesn't subscribe to your rules of war, who doesn't subscribe to your way of life in terms of even dignity in war, I think it took them a while to understand. I'm not saying this to pander to the audience just because I'm in the land of Shivaji, but the first person to give it back to them in their own coin was him. And he realized that the Japanese banzai style of attack, where you jump on the enemy in an open attack, despite the fact that you're outnumbered heavily, will not work here. So if you see some of the descriptions of battles, early battles in what is seen as Rajputana at this point, between the Islamic, let's say, forces and the Hindu forces, I will say that the division was very clear there. We resorted to the old style Kshatriya kind of attack, which is you were hoping that he would be honest enough to face you properly and that your children and women would never be affected. Because the one thing which people keep forgetting is that, of course, there were battles between Hindu kings. Of course, there were battles between Hindu samrajyas at all points of time. That is natural, because the rule of a Kshatriya is constant expansion of his territory. That would continue. The point is, the Jivan Pranali would be left untouched. That is why there has been continuity of life despite these battles between these kingdoms, which are purely political in nature. They would not destroy each other's temples. They would actually take away each other's deities and sanctify it in their kingdoms. Now, when geniuses actually compare that example with the Muslim invasions, to say you guys also did the same thing, and take the argument to its logical conclusion, which is we took those, let's say, deities, because we said if it comes to our country or our kingdom, it brings prosperity along with it, and that energy will now reside in my kingdom. We respect that energy, therefore we want it there. That's not the case with the other person. Now, it took us a while to understand this. Now, unfortunately, I think the clear milestone, the negative milestone, which resulted in this concept of compromise being deeply ingrained in our consciousness, is one, of course, the introduction of the English education system, and two, the deification of certain individuals who were textbook products as envisaged by the British education system. And I am not holding anyone responsible in retrospect because I derive some vicarious pleasure in pulling them down. I am saying if that mentality continues till date and it has a continuing effect, I have no other option but to discuss the person. The person I am discussing is Raja Ram Mohan Roy. According to me, Raja Ram Mohan Roy has not been analyzed enough. I don't think his contributions or otherwise to Hindu thought have been understood enough. And Raja Ram Mohan Roy was seen as the ideological progenitor of the Congress by the Congress itself in its official biographies of the institution, of the organization. So that means you set up the biggest political platform with the support of the British and with Raja Ram Mohan Roy as your Adarsh. What do you expect after that? He blows up Sati. Sati was literally prevalent in pockets and in negligible numbers. That is blown up as the sole identity that defines Bharat's identity or the Hindu identity. You have literally handed yourself on a golden platter to someone who wishes to convert you by saying this is the problem with my community, and you've blown up the scope of the problem. I'm never saying ignore the problem. I'm never going to say brush it under the carpet. I'm saying but do not magnify it beyond its actual extent, because that is giving a handle to someone who's motivated. So to my mind, that phase of Bharatiya history effectively has been poorly understood, because just as certain other icons today cannot be touched because touching them would mean creating caste tensions, Raja Ram Mohan Roy cannot be touched because he is apparently seen as the ideological forebearer of modern India. That, I think, is where this problem has started. Fortunately, what I see as the Shakta movement, which resulted in the revolutionary movement being created, and through so-called extremists like the Lal Bal Pal, okay, and these people effectively started that movement. Had that thought process not entered the Congress, I shudder to think what would have been the fate of this country in 1947, because the Congress in 1947 was significantly represented by both stands. the moderates and the extremists, because there was some kind of a compromise. Then, of course, in between, there was the creation of the Swaraj Party and all that. So, had that not happened, we would have been lock, stock, sold fully. And we would have perhaps remained Hindus, but we would have become completely Christianized Hindus. To me, conversion to Christianity is better than Christianization of the Hindu identity. Because frankly speaking, then what happens is you're an absolute hypocrite, or you are sleeping in such a deep bubble that you don't recognize that you have Christianized Hindu tenets fully. That is worse, because one is to reject the Shastra and the other is to biblicize the Shastra. I cannot accept the second. And that is what we are going down the path of. I say this, that everybody who speaks of reform in the Hindu society needs to be extremely cautious of what is it that you exactly want. In whose image do you want to mold the Hindu society is a question you need to ask. And second, if according to you, reform will lead to greater prosperity and unity, well, the product of reformation, which is modern day Europe, is in front of you, which is being taken over, and the fastest rising religion in that particular continent is Islam. So, my case is better made by the future, the potential future of Bharat, which is the present of Europe. I rest my case.
Hello. You've often talked about the gaslighting that, for the lack of a better word, let's say left, and by left I mean the vast conglomerate of anybody who is basically non-Hindu or non-Hindutva, are using basically to play down any assertion by Hindus by either calling it majoritarian or by calling it fascist or by calling it, the words that somebody used to rebut your article, mansplaining and savarnasplaining. So these are all the terms that have been randomly used. So my question to you is, for the benefit of the audience, how is it, see, you are capable of arguing it, you are capable of replying a good rebuttal to it, but when a Hindu student goes to a college and he starts making a case, and then these same things are thrown at him, the same terms are thrown at him to gaslight him, how does he or she deal with it? How do they find their voice, which is unapologetic and assertive?
I'm going to say something that might sound controversial, which everything I say sounds anyways. The key is not knowledge. The key is practice of the faith. When someone says that, oh, he knows all of this, therefore he is confident. Why would I know all of it without an interest in knowing it? And why would I feel the need to defend it if I did not feel the proximity to my faith system? Your battle with people within and outside is not a battle of knowledge. It's not a battle of ideas. It is a battle of commitment to your dharma, period. And if you think this is all about knowledge, I can arm people with knowledge, but I can't give them conviction if they have not been brought up with it. We are addressing the problem at the tertiary level when the primary problem is the family and the household. The horses have bolted from the stables, from the primary, that is from the family, to the secondary, which is the school, to the tertiary, which is when they are beyond any institutional control. And then you're hoping to instill some kind of, let's say, values in them. How is this going to work? Instagram and short reels cannot do exactly what parents should have done. That's putting too much of faith in the power of social media and giving it actually too much of control over your thought. Every allegation that is hurled against me is equally hurled by us, or even the true, let's say, liberals, against practicing Muslims also, or practicing Catholics also. Why is he not shamed so quickly as the Hindu? He is not shamed as quickly. The Hindu immediately starts behaving like the middle class person. I'll tell you why I say the middle class person. I have come from a lower middle class family, so I'm not using this in a negative sense, which is, Of all the three strata of the society, or the stratae of the society, the one strata of the society which is quick to be shamed is always the middle class person, because he is neither there, neither here nor there. The fellow below doesn't care. Equally applies to the fellow above. The person who has to care is the middle class fellow. The Hindu mindset at this point is almost like the middle class fellow. Quickly you can say, Savarna, caste, man, that's it, job done, they'll buckle like a pack of cards. It's over. Okay, go a step further. Yes, I agree with all of it. So what? So what? What is left of argument? Of course, you call me Savarna? Fine, okay, done. The culture of this country has been created by all the Varnas. The civilization is the product of the contribution of all the Varnas. You don't know it is not my problem. Okay? 2. So the difference between the two is the familial control over the faith aspect of your personality and the institutional control, or let's call it differently, the congregational control. The strength of congregational religions is the ability to reinforce a sense of community and identity once a week. So you constantly know that you're not alone, you're not alone, you're not alone. Whereas the Hindu says, I'm alone, I'm alone, I'm alone. So that is exactly the contribution. And some of our, let's say, progenitors were so scintillating in their analysis. Why did Tilak start the Shivaji and Ganesh festival? He realized what was happening. Brilliant analysis. That is perhaps the one or two slivers on which Dr. Ambedkar and Tilak were on the same page. They were perhaps otherwise, let's say, poles apart. But on this they agreed that the congregational aspect of the other faith systems needs to be reinforced here in order for you to realize that your courage is not just based on your individual courage, but also knowing that if you get into a fight, you will never be caught alone. The confidence of the other side is actually that it will never be caught alone. Plus, they will always have the state to support it, right? Regardless of who is in power. We will never have the state to support us regardless of who is in power. That's a fact. So, therefore, the core idea that needs to be addressed is the practice of the faith at the most fundamental level, not in an Abrahamic sense, but realizing one thing for a fact. Adherence to the Shastra is not negative. Adherence to the Shastras have become so vilified that the moment I say this is what my scripture says, and what my scripture says is the product of collective wisdom, generated over thousands of years of trial and error, and I have no reason to doubt it. Because as long as the Shastra ruled the roost, this country remained impregnable. The concession on the Shastra is the first way to the concession on the Shastra. And that is something that we have not understood. And if you think you're going to win this battle with values such as secularism, liberalism, I would say, citing Kodandarama, Ram Naam Satya Hai.
Okay, now let me play the devil's advocate here and ask you the next question. Yeah. You've talked about this lack of congregation and this feeling that the Hindu has that he or she is alone as a Hindu. But you see what's happening in India, and you will find that if you play the regional identity card, if you play the language card, you play the Jati card, then you will get thousands and millions of people behind you. Correct. So you call it Dravidianism, you call it caste reservations, Correct. You call it whatever. Correct. So Hindus find it easier to gather in sub-identities. Like you will fight for your language issue, you'll fight for your regional issue, you'll fight for your caste issue. But to come together as a Hindu, why is it so difficult for us?
Correct. So this is the hypocrisy of both the left and the right, and I'll explain why. Because the hypocrisy of the left is well known, the hypocrisy of the right is rarely spoken of. And I don't belong to the right. I belong to the INDIC side, I'm very clear about it, because I don't associate it with any imported ideal as much as possible. Here's the problem. So tribalism is a reality of human psychology. It could be ideological, it could be ethnic, it could be linguistic, it could be cultural or religious. Now we are comfortable with tribalism at the sub-identity level. But the moment we speak of Hinduism, we start mouthing this nonsense. It's all inclusive. You don't compromise on the boundaries of your sub-identity, but you compromise on the boundaries of the larger identity.
That was my question.
What stupidity is this? Who is teaching you this? When Bhishma speaks with Yudhishthira at the fag end of his life and he's basically giving him, let's say, discourses on Rajniti and whatnot, one of the things I think he says is that Vedas are supreme. Now, going by that, if I say this, that Vedas are supreme, there are obviously certain folds within the Hindu denomination or Hindu sects who don't believe as Veda as the primary pramana. They may believe in the other four precepts, which is dharma, artha, kama, moksha, but they may not believe that the Veda is the primary source or proof of this fact. That could be the distinction between these Astika and Nastik schools of thought. Nevertheless, if you go by the scripture, the definition of Bharat and the definition of what is Mlecha is dependent entirely on subscription to the Veda and eating habits, which is we will not consume beef. These are certain non-negotiables. You can't say this today. The left disagreeing with it is no surprise. But you can't say this even with people from the non-left. Because apparently, to include the modern secular liberal Hindu, who anyway doesn't want to be a part of you, you must somehow compromise on your non-negotiables. Whereas the other side is saying, whoever you may be, you join this fold, you will live by this, period. That's it. If not, you don't get to speak on our subjects. You don't get to hold forth on what is modern Hinduism without actually even subscribing to the basics of non-negotiables. That need for very clear red lines is not need for fundamentalism, is the need for a clearly defined identity. And when that need is constantly diluted, like a company which wants to expand its shareholder base or its customer base at the expense of its core messaging, will come back to haunt you at some point. In such a volatile world, where identity is ruling the roost from the left to the right and every other place, you're telling me that your best possible strategy is dilution of your identity? Well, you're doing what the other fellow already wants. So what battle are you in? I don't understand. It's like getting into boxing matching. Tum kyun maar rahe? Main apne aap ko maar leta hu. You might as well get out of the boxing ring altogether, throw in the towel. So, that larger identity. Two, how do you build this larger identity? You're asking people that at the altar of Hindutva and Hindu unity, to give up Jati identities fully. It hasn't worked for 1,000 years. Because Jati will continue even after you convert in some places. You have Brahmin churches in Goa, you have Shudra churches in Goa. So if Jati is not something you're able to do away with, not just here, but in the larger subcontinent, it appears to be endemic to the reality, the social realities of this part of the world. Why do you think you can succeed where all your ancestors have failed? What do you have which they had never had? How are you better off in understanding the Hindu society when all of them have realized you can't do away with this? That some kind of grouping is going to work somewhere or the other? When you know you can't work against something, you should find a way to make it your strength. Which means reinforcement of the fact that the presence of Jati and Varna is proof of presence of Hindu Dharma everywhere. It should not be the other way around. The left wants Jati without Dharma. Members of the right want Dharma without Jati. And both of them don't realize, so they are clear at the very least. You finish this, that's the end of Dharma. These guys think Dharma will still survive without this. From Lalita Sahasranamam to Vishnu Sahasranamam to Purusha Suktam to everything. The integrality of Varnashrama Dharma to Sanatana Dharma is very clear. By the time you end Vishnu Sahasranamam, it will basically speak of knowledge for the Brahmin, strength and victory for the Kshatriya, then Samruddhi for the Vaishya, and peace for the Shudra. You will find this in Lalita Sahasranamam also. In fact, it goes on to say that she is the one who has created the Chaturvarnashram. Okay? Now you please sit with me and tell me all of this is false. Why? Because you're saying, if I don't disagree with this, how will I then defeat Udayanidhi Stalin in a debate? So to defeat Udayanidhi Stalin in a debate, I will remove and redact verses from Lalita Sahasranamam and Vishnu Sahasranamam. Jai Hindutva. Huh? This can't be the way how it works. Have the courage of your conviction to defend these concepts. What you need to be able to do is, if it results in exclusion, if it results in discrimination, if it results in a situation where it excludes people from access to certain spaces, that is what you need to fight. So to fight caste-based discrimination is one thing, and to say I will annihilate caste is a completely different thing altogether. Fine, then there is also bound to be discrimination on the basis of gender. Let's finish gender. Oh wait, left is already doing it. Because they are saying patriarchy is responsible for all evils. So finish patriarchy, so finish man, so what is left? Even woman is not there. If one identity is gone, where will be the other identity? Okay, let's finish religious discrimination. Oh wait, communism already exists, no, because it says no God. So if you start morphing Hindutva in the mold of the left and the communists and let's say in terms of their ideology, so you're producing leftist Hindutva. So the version of Hindutva is communist Hindutva. Identity will always exist. You must find a way to reconcile it with your realities without giving up the core. It's easy to say, let's remove the concept of caste from temples. Will you say this to all those temples where the Purohit is not the Brahmin? I dare you to say this. You will not be able to say this because it's politically incorrect to say it. It will have consequences on the streets. So clearly, all the prejudices with respect to Hindu Dharma that the left has perpetuated, including anti-Brahmanism, have been successfully accepted by the Hindus, let's say the Hindutva guardians as well, which according to me is the charam seema of the success of the left. When you speak in their language and you have just called it Hindutva, social justice and reform, what is it in, how different is it in spirit? Only the difference is in the labeling of the product. If that's the case, I might as well go with the original. Why should I go with the counterfeit? As an IPR lawyer, I'd say go for the original then.
So what is the way out of it? Is the way out of it to go back to your sampradaya, to go back to your temples, use temples as an institution that acted as a institution that basically held the society together? Is that the way? When you talk about finding your faith, see, nowadays we have made our faith increasingly an individual thing. Okay, you sit in your house and
religion
you do meditation.
Is personal, apparently.
Yeah, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, kind of dichotomy. Horrible. So how do we make it once again inclusive, once again communal in a not in the sense the left uses it, but as a community activity? How do we again make it more congregational, so to speak?
There are three possible solutions, and I'm not saying this as someone who was a Trikalagnani. I don't know. I'm just saying this. One, whether you like it or not, the definition of Sampradaya has something to do with Jati. Because some deities have evolved as a consequence of the vocations practiced by the members of the Jati. If you say, let's finish Sampradayas altogether, you're also saying those deities must also go. You may not understand this. Because when you say this, who is going to take the tradition forward? If it happens to be a deity that is close to the weaving community or the cobbler community, who knows what is to be done? Then your only solution is, let some of these deities perish at the altar of Hindu unity. The better thing to do, according to me, is reinforce the Sanskritic layer over the regional layer or the linguistic layer. And the best way to do this is language. And that is what the Englishman brilliantly understood. He has made a so-called common identity where English has become the common identity thanks to the lingua franca that you use, right? Now, therefore, follow the triple, let's say, language system, regional 100%. You choose either English or something else as, let's say, your medium of engagement with the rest of the world. But Indians must at least believe in engaging with each other through layman Sanskrit or layperson Sanskrit, to use Justin Trudeau's language. So I think it's important that the Sanskritic identity cannot be re-established without the re-establishment of Sanskrit needs to be clearly understood. On that, if you're busy saying Sanskrit is not Hindu, yoga is not Hindu, yoga nidra is not Hindu, Hindu is not Hindu, Hare? What is the debate here then? That is one. Second, to those geniuses who say I am spiritual but not religious, you are neither. Simply because you're too lazy to be disciplined, and that is passed off as evolved spirituality, which according to me is humbug of the first order. Ritual has multiple aspects to it. Discipline is one element. But when you enter the metaphysics of ritual, when you realize that from the smell to the sound to the color, all of them have a very clear impact on your consciousness and your ability to direct your consciousness in one particular direction, you will realize how deep this goes. Before you start any Devi Puja, the first elaborate procedure that they do is the color of the Rangoli, which is elaborately laid out. There is a paddhati for it. The colors used have a paddhati for it. The design of the yantra has a specific paddhati for it. The manner in which you lay the bricks for the home, everything has a very specific reason for it. What is the meaning of the east? What is the meaning of the west? What is the meaning of Advarayu? Where will the Brahma sit? All of this have meanings for it. So if you say that de-ritualized Hinduism is the only thing I am capable of subscribing to, I will not come in the way. Please do it. You can go to that level, just don't drag the rest of us to that level. Because your insistence is going to be that from temples to Hindu population must now subscribe to my lowered levels of Hindu practice. That cannot be the case. Because then you are saying, I am modern, I am secular, I am equally Hindu. So my definition of Hinduism should now be commonly applicable. That is the problem with the Sabarimala example. Where you're saying ritual में क्या रखा है, मान्यताओं में क्या रखा है, संप्रदाय में क्या रखा है, anything goes. There can't be a dress code, there can't be red lines even within a temple. So need for an understanding of ritual, because if you see the history of the world, every religion that has given up on ritual will lose its identity in less than 400 or 500 years. The textbook example is the consequence of the Protestant Reformation on the survival of Christianity in Europe. Because Catholic Christianity did two things. Because it was introduced during the Roman period, it chose, and there was a conflict between the non-Christian pagans and heathens and the new revolutionaries called the Christians at that point. They combined both. So saints were created after, or let's say based on, the figures that were previously held dear by the pre-Christian citizens of Rome. So Catholic Christianity combines elements of Christianity and combines elements of local faith systems. Which is why, even in India, Catholic Christians don't have a problem wearing bindi and the bangle. It is the Protestant who won't wear it. It is the Protestant who won't wear the Hindu symbols, the Mangal Sutra or whatever. The Catholics will still do it, because that has been the strategy of Catholic Christianity all along. The Judeo-Abrahamization of Catholic Christianity is a slightly later phenomenon. The original Catholic Christianity, to a significant extent, is a product of the parliaments created, the religious parliaments created in Europe, where they say, how do we now define the history of Christianity? How do we define what is, who is Jesus and why is he divine, so on and so forth. I think it's called the Parliament of Nicaea. So when you see that, and from there you see Protestant Reformation, we see Protestant Reformation as marking the beginning of enlightenment, as marking the beginning of an advancement of Europe. Protestant Reformation starts around the 15th or let's say maybe 16th century. And today you are in 2023. It's taken only 500 years for Europe to stop believing that it's a Christian continent. So several of the Hindu panths which said, we don't want the Karmakanda of the Veda, that is only for the Brahmin, we don't want it, are seeing Christianization of their states, and I'm talking of Punjab. You create a panth without the need for a ritual, you have opened yourself to somebody else. You will have Yesu Kirtan going on there.
Yeah, but while I understand this,
It's a leftist
Hello.
conspiracy.
While I understand this, it is also happening in the coastal states of the south.
Yeah.
Amongst populations
Yeah.
which held on to their dharma for thousands of years
Right.
in a very ritualistic way.
Right.
So, how is it becoming this easy to divorce them from their ritualized faith?
So the two labs of missionary experimentation in this country were Bengal and the South, because these were almost the first two presidencies. I think Battle of Buxar and Plassey. The East India Company gets the Diwani in 1765 after the Battle of 1764, which is the right to collect taxation on behalf of Shah Alam II, who was the Mughal emperor, in Odisha, Bengal, and Bihar. So that's the first lab. Then Madras was set up in 1639. So their very first port, or let's say their trading post, was set up in Masulipatnam, I think in 1615. And then I think it's Surat, then Madras, and then Bengal. So when they come, along with that, you have the missionaries coming with them. Yeah. So the series that I'm writing in the Indian Express is actually tracing this history, showing how they spent almost 100 years, or maybe 70 years, trying to separate Shaiva Siddhanta from Hindu Dharma. Saying Shaiva Siddhanta has got nothing to do with Hindu Dharma. That literature is built over decades. And gradually they start looking at the obstacle called Jati coming in the way of conversion. So then they realize that the only way for me to make Jati my strength is by creating a larger fissure, and that is the racial fissure of the Aryan and the Dravidian. So if I say that these Jatis are fundamentally Dravidian, then the entire Jati falls as a block. Okay. So you see there's this bank, Tamil Nadu Mercantile Bank, that is run by the Nadars. And Nadars as a community, you will find a huge demographic split, having moved away to Christianity. Okay?
50, I think.
Correct. And this is in the Tirunelveli side, and I think it's in that part, Sivakasi, Tirunelveli, that side. And it's otherwise, Nadars, Mudaliyars, Chettiyars, and all these communities are both landed, mercantile, and heavily Shaivite communities. And their belief in Hindu Dharma, including when they played the role of soldiers at one point, was huge. They were converted as a block, thanks to the racial fissure. When you say that if your faith is strong, you can't be converted, I keep trying to poison you for 5 days against one person. Let me see if your mind hasn't even slightly changed towards that person when you interact with that person. If not anything else, I've already sowed a seed of doubt in your head each time you talk to that person. Imagine this happens at an institutional level for decades, with money also being offered. Plus, when Hindu Dharma's restrictions and obligations are presented as discrimination, then what do? If I clearly say, nobody can enter the Garbhagriha except the Purohit, even if you're a Brahmin. But you say only the half-truth. See, only Brahmins are allowed inside the Garbhagriha, then what do? If I then make the statement, boss, everybody had access to Hindu knowledge systems. The knowledge of the Vedas alone were limited to Brahmins for only one reason, because there are elevated standards of Anushtanas that are supposed to be practiced throughout the day. Apart from the Sandhya Vandan, the fire has to be kept burning at all points of time. So you have to be an Agnihotri for you to continue saying this. There are limitations on procreation. There are limitations on food. You are expected to cook on your own whenever you travel. All these restrictions exist. So unless those restrictions are followed, you cannot subscribe to this, or you cannot have access to this. This is an elevated eligibility criteria for an advanced knowledge system. You're telling me for a postdoctoral degree, I'm going with 6th standard mathematics. Okay? Not possible, not permissible. It's as much a spiritual tradition as much as it is a knowledge tradition. And since it is a spiritual tradition based on knowledge, you cannot compromise on this under any circumstances. Assuming that the outsider comes and says, look at this discrimination. They don't want to talk about the fact that from Vishwakarma communities to all the communities, they had a working knowledge of the Vedas. Because those communities, they had to have, because those who could not access the Vedas directly, they were given the 5th Veda, which is Mahabharata. Which is your Itihasas are meant to convey the very same message of Dharma that Veda conveys, except that it does that in a more relatable form, in a much more, let's say, story-based form. Stories have been our way of communicating the saransh and the essence of the Vedas to those communities which are otherwise kept away from it because of restrictions based on Shastra. So you have that. Then, if you really understand the Vedic tradition, then you will know that out of the 4 Vedas, you have the 6 Vedangas, and you also have what is known as the Upaveda, which means at least 14 to 18 knowledge traditions that have come out of it. Dhanur Vidya is directly connected to Yajurveda. Similarly, Shilpa Shastra and Vastu Shastra is connected to one particular Veda, which means you think of this as the core basic science. From that comes out one particular applied science. So each applied science is related to one particular Veda. Now, if Upaveda can be practiced by others who are not practicing Brahmins in the Vedic sense, what is the discrimination that you're exactly speaking of? The applied part of the Veda which comes out of each Veda is available for access, right? But you don't want to talk about it because gradually even we have bought the very same lie of the missionary. The tragedy of independent Bharat is that it has taken every lie perpetuated to it by the colonizer. That hasn't been addressed. And it is not just about history. It is about actual discussions that we carry on today with respect to Jati and any other subject which is sensitive to us. So I think that's where the answer is. So I certainly appreciate efforts of all current day historians. But the one thing that we certainly need is people who are actually trained in the Vedas to go out as ambassadors and speak of the truth of the Vedas and explain what is the distortion it has been subjected to over the last 150 to 200 years. Very few people are qualified for it.
Very, very true. I'll ask you 2 last questions and I'll take questions from the audience. The penultimate question is actually about temples.
Yeah.
I personally think that many of our problems as a society could be solved if we once again make temples the core of our social life,
right,
which we have stopped doing it. Now we go to temple simply to have a 5-minute darshan and come out. We don't have a sense of belonging to the temple. Earlier, temples were all about the community.
We don't go there as a community, we go there as individuals.
Yes, and even if we go there as individual, we don't spend time at the temple. We just go have darshan like literally for 2 minutes and then come out. That is the extent.
Right.
We do not see the temple. We are not involved in running the temple. And part of it is also because a lot of temples in a lot of states are government controlled. So we do not feel that we own the temples.
Right.
So what is your position on that?
See, every time we speak of temple control, I have certain voices on our side, so to speak. I don't know whether they're from our side truly. They say that, oh, but what will happen if temples are given back to the community? Brahmin domination will be back. Arey bhai, you go through the legislations which control temples. There are specific sections. I'll give the example of the Tamil Nadu HRC Act, which speaks of the composition of the trust. It includes members of the SC/ST community. No person who has challenged these legislations in the Supreme Court has challenged these provisions, which is, there are at least 4 petitions in the Supreme Court saying we have a problem only with the government exercising too much of control over the temples and the fact that the government appoints executive officers without conducting elections for appointment of the trustees. So there is one chapter that deals with government control, there is one chapter that deals with appointment of trustees. This chapter is never being implemented, whereas they constantly implement the other chapter. So those who are fighting for temple control are not fighting for Brahmin control of temples, they are fighting for community control of temples. When it comes to community control of temples, again there will be 2 separate aspects. One is the religious aspect and the other is the financial aspect. The religious aspect will be governed by the Shastra that governs the temple. The financial aspect is open for community management so that everybody feels included. Now there they are saying if the religious aspect is fully controlled by the members of the community and it is by the Shastra, then again people will be kept out. No, it can't happen for 2 reasons. Article 17 abolishes untouchability. So we are not asking for amendment of Article 17. Second, Article 25(2)(b) specifically says that entry of previously depressed classes into the temples or into places of worship will not be interfered with. That's the effective mandate of that particular provision. We are not asking for any change in that. The simple thing that you should do is to replicate those languages in the state legislation, which already it has in some legislations, and you retain the trust provision And the only thing that you do is to cut down the power of the government significantly. This is it. That's all there is to it. When somebody says, किसको दें, जिससे तुमने चुराया, तुम्हें पता नहीं किसको वापस देना है. What, I mean, when somebody gives this argument, we don't know who to give it back to. What an absolutely disingenuous and dishonest argument to make, regardless of who is saying it. And if somebody is saying this thinking that they're being loyal to any particular party in power, be loyal to that party in power. But please don't confuse that with loyalty to Hindu Dharma. They're not the same.
Hello. My last question to you is about the third part of your trilogy. It's all set to come out sometimes early next year, right?
August.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about what that will cover?
I don't know, it's fortunate or unfortunate, but from 3 it has become 4. That means more work for me, apart from my own regular work. So I didn't want to release the third book this year because I made a conscious decision to remove the author tag from my introduction. Because I have no interest in becoming an author, and I don't think if I'm a full-time author who's earning his livelihood through writing, I would want to be called as an author. I'm moonlighting as an author. So the second thing is, it would have regenerated another cycle of promotions, taking away time from my practice. So I said that I'm taking a break this year from writing. The third book will cover the period from 1724 December, when Khilafat movement is supposed to have ended, till tentatively 1939, when you're waiting for the Second World War to begin, because it has a bearing on our constitutional thought as well. The fourth book will cover the period from 1939 to 1951, because 39 to 45 sees a massive shift in definitions of majority and minority thanks to persecution of ethnic and religious minorities in Europe. And that starts influencing constitutional thought processes. And that is why you find provisions in our constitution dealing with majority and minority. So I didn't want those two discussions to be captured in 2 different books. So that entire period will be captured in the final book. And if all goes well, by the grace of the gods, in plural, not in singular, I will hope to actually release the 4th book in 2025, which would be the 75th year of the Republic. Okay, and conclude it then. So the one thing that I do each time is, it's like almost like a salsa dance. So in every book, I go 2 steps back and then 3 steps forward. So in this third book, I'm covering significantly the period from 1763 to 1924 in the first section. Then from 1924 to 39 will be captured in the second and third sections, when it will join the first 2 books. So the merger of narrative will happen. Why am I covering 1763 to 1924? The Sannyasi Rebellion from 1763 to 1800. When you had the Sannyasi Rebellion in Bengal, how did we arrive at Rajaram Mohan Roy a few years later? That's the question I want to ask. So that would be covered. Then you're looking at the beginnings of the separatist Sikh identity around that period. Then you're looking at the Ambedkar movement, you're looking at the Dravidian movement, you're looking at the communist movement, and you're looking at the Sangathan movement. So those histories will be captured in the first section until 1924, and then how these people fight with each other from 24 to 39, gradually leading to the partition of Bharat and the shaping of our constitutional thought. That is the Manchitra of the third book. So I hope to come out with it in August 2024.
Hello, sir. I am Advocate Rudhira Patil, and I just wanted to, I am watching your reels and all the knowledge sessions on social media, and I'm really very much glad and feel so proud that you have visited in our city.
Thank you.
So my question is, like, what drives you for this purpose, sir? This is first question. And second is, where do you get this aura, this positivity? We just want to know about it, sir.
So if you believe people, I'm driven by popularity. And I'm motivated by the sale of my books. I'm motivated by the money I get from China. I'm motivated by certain lawyers from the Congress who apparently were my mentors. I am motivated by all the group photos that I take, and especially when women come and take pictures, apparently that drives me. So these are all the motivations. And since I'm an IP lawyer, I function on incentive. So this is my incentive. But the lie, this is the truth. Okay, so the lie is that I don't care for any of this. The absolute lie is that I don't care for any of this. Shefali ji knows how much I refuse to come. Yeah. Not and today, across the board, and not because I had a problem coming to Nashik. No, that's not the thing. The thing is, I said, I need to know what am I achieving from this in terms of value or impact. If it's going to be another session, group photo session, selfie session, some Instagram post here and there, I don't want it because I think I'm done with that cycle. I wanted to understand what impact my work creates. The book tours have told me it is making an impact. 2, it is making an impact from the age group of, I've seen 9th standard students write to me telling me that they are trying to read the books. That tells me that the core audience is being hit. Second, I've also seen people take up derivative works out of it and apply it to their own lives and to their professions. So that second order effect is achieved. 3, I wanted the books to penetrate UPSC coaching centers and libraries of institutions. It has done that. Now, I don't need to do anything more because what has happened is over the last 1 year, mainstream publications have literally come to my doorstep saying, please write for us. Indian Express was never a platform people like me could have gotten access to in the past. I've gotten access there. And they know for a fact, they've willingly said, "Aa bel mujhe maar." And I've told them very clearly. So one of the terms that they offered was, we will pay you for every article. I said, I don't want a payment from the left under any circumstances. I'm very self-sufficient. I don't need anybody for anything. A lot of people also end up thinking that I'm some kind of a jola chap who is going around asking for paisa de do, paisa de do. Nahi chahiye bhai. I have no reason for it at all. If Hindu code was not there, we would have been allowed to marry 3 people. I have the resources to marry 3 people and maintain them. So I don't want it. I'm abundantly clear about the fact that I have no need for money from anybody at all because it's an insult to a practicing lawyer to offer money. I'm very good at what I do. My professional ego is supreme. I don't need anything from anyone. So the reason why I'm being hyper selective about these activities and why I think it's important is that as much as there is cause for positivity, there is equally a growing challenge. And I'm very clear about the fact that I can communicate some things in the manner that they need to be communicated without getting into trouble. I know the thin red line, and I know how to walk on that line. It's a matter of nature and nurture, both. So I know exactly how to do that. And when people like me speak or people like Vishnu speak, it gives confidence to youngsters, saying that he is not some old man who has nothing to lose who is talking about this. These people have actually put everything on the line. 2, I am not making any sacrifice whatsoever. Not one bit, except on my sleep and family time to some extent. But even that I have significantly cut down. Across the board, organizers know they will get a standard message from me because thanks to autocorrect, it knows what exactly I have to say. I say, Namaste, thank you for your kind invitation. However, I'm extremely occupied with my packed practice schedule and the writing schedule of the 3rd book. I will not be available until, initially it was February, now it has moved to April. That's it. They know they'll get a standard refusal now. Because if I don't see value in that engagement, I will not. The reason I have come here is for 2 reasons. Trayambakeshwar is here. Okay. And second, Maharashtra is a huge state and you can't define Maharashtra solely by Nagpur, Mumbai and Pune. It's important that there is more penetration here. So it made sense to actually visit another region of Maharashtra and to actually make an impact here because the surrounding places are very peaceful, right? So it's very important to come and make an impact here. So my motivation is very clear, which is try and keep the self at the background as much as possible. It's difficult. I am no sannyasi. I too have an ego. Contrary to popular perception, I'm not a humble person at all. It just so happens that I know what are the limits of my knowledge and what are the limits of my ego, and I know who is good at what. I cede space. If somebody is better at something than me, I will agree with it. My ego will not come in the way of that acknowledgement. So the point is, the very purpose of these engagement is strategic, disruptive, surgical attacks, period. You get into the place, start a fire and get out of the place. When I go to campuses, the point of going to those campuses is to empower voices which have been silenced and say, start talking. Find the spine to start talking. If you don't have that, and if you're going to create a bhajan mandali or a kavali mandali out of my reels and make a cult out of me, forgive me, I'm not interested in that. I have no interest in becoming the head of another personality cult. 2, positivity. I've said this, dharmiks don't have the luxury of being pessimists. If this is the bottom of the bell curve, यहाँ से ऊपर ही जा सकते हैं और कहाँ जा सकते हैं, इससे बदतर कैसे हल हो सकता है? According to me, a verse of the 1947, क्योंकि तब तो एटलीस्ट आपके हाथ में तलवार हो सकता था, बात भी कर सकते हैं. अब आप ना बात कर सकते हैं ना आपके हाथ में तलवार हो सकता है. If people believe that the reality of 47 has changed, it's just an ongoing, let's say, reality, except its Rooprekha has changed. And the labels have changed. I've said this before, we don't need to believe in violence. But we certainly need to believe in the use of deterrent force and protect yourself. How many examples do you want across the country where the state has proved to be absolutely napunsak and impotent in protecting Hindus? So, this is no more an academic discussion. It is not a post-dinner katha kalakshepam. It's not a harikatha in a temple. Unfortunately, I hope harikathas in temple take up these issues. I hope that happens. So I genuinely believe that it is imperative for people to speak. I'm not saying I'm here with some kind of messianic belief, but one of the very clear reasons, apart from other reasons for making the transition from engineering to law, was to make these serious disruptive public interventions. And so I will not give it up. I will just ask myself 3 questions. Is it coming at the expense of my professional time? Is it coming at the expense of my health? My family has compromised enough, and therefore how do I strike a balance? And 4, is the platform deserving of it, or does the platform deserve my support? That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please choose. I don't want to be accused.
Myself, Viraj Marathe.
Ji.
I am IT engineer. Just a small question. In that way, these Hindus are flatter under the umbrella of casteism. How you will going to tie these Hindus in one string? Answer. I will expect answer will be in one line, or it will be a one word.
Jati dharma and Hindu dharma are not antarvirodhi, and Jati dharma doesn't require you to look down upon people. If you look down upon a profession, I've said this I think in several places, don't use the jibe puncture wala at anyone, because puncture walas don't belong to one particular community. Don't make fun of any profession. It's not correct. That reveals your elitist nature. Don't do it. As a civilization, we have respected people across the board. No society can function without the Shudras. The Shudra word is not a bad word. It's a proud word. It is the foundation of every civilization. If you read the second book, the opening portion of the second book contains verses from the Vedas specifically explaining how there are Varnashrama dharma systems even within the Devas. Who is seen as the Brahmana, who is seen as the Kshatriya, who is seen as the Shudra. The earth is seen as the Shudra because it is the Shudra that provides for everyone. Okay? So first, take away the negative connotations associated with this word. That is where you remove this in your head. And 2, the least that we can do when we speak of battling conversions and other things is that if someone from our community comes asking for monetary help, find a way to support that person until we have institutional structures such as temples to support these people. I'll give you a blunt example. If you really want to fight reservations, you can't fight reservations without a replacement. And the replacement, according to me, is temple money actually going into their education as opposed to going into the coffers of the government. Period.
Sumit Patwardhan here. Excuse me, this side.
Hello.
Sumit Patwardhan here. I'm
I'll
a
leave it to Shefali ji.
Okay.
I have no problems.
Just 2 minutes. We are already running late by about 45 minutes. So I will just be able to take 3 questions, one from here, 2 from this side.
should I start? Yeah. Radhe Radhe, Sai. I'm Sumit Patwardhan. I'm a chartered accountant by profession.
Ji.
Two questions in the same scenario actually. First is when we are in a social setting, we have one set of people who are completely deranged from the dharmic fold. At no point, no amount of facts or even evidences that are given to them in the conversation, make them see any kind of sanity. How do we deal with such lot? And the second is when we are in a social setting with peoples of the Abrahamic faith, is it wiser or rather how exactly do we go on the offensive in trying to pick holes within what they are saying, which is actually very easy from a logical point of view, but is it wiser? Is it, how exactly do we go about doing that? Because I think going on the offensive is also kind of essential.
I don't think it makes sense to try and convince someone who's already formed an opinion. I don't waste my time doing that. I wait for history to prove itself. And with each passing day, with what is happening in the Middle East and other places, our case is only becoming stronger. So you don't need to do anything. You wait for them to embarrass themselves by defending even this. They will do that shamelessly. Let everybody watch it. In those moments, don't shut them up. Let them speak. Because they are making your case better than you could have ever, thanks to the defense of even the indefensible. That's one. Don't see your need to engage with them, to convince them, is not coming from a need to prove Dharma's point, but perhaps it's an ego investment. And I'm not talking about you in general. What I'm saying is, fight those battles where it is not just worth your time, where you know for a fact it's an impressionable fence sitter who is young, who doesn't know where to form an opinion. Intervene there. Those are the people who are actually open to understanding your point of view. Today the leftists cannot convince me fully, under no circumstances. Just as I can't convince them. So his investment or my investment in each other to try and convince the other is useless. Second, how do you make your point and still not attract any kind of attention? I think as Hindus who believe in the power of the tongue, the Vak is such an important aspect of our understanding of the sound and all that, and Shabda Pramana has such an important aspect. So please observe some sense of smartness in the way you engage on social media. You have to realize that the odds are stacked against you, so much so that nobody has the power today to prevent any kind of SDSJ kind of declarations against you. So use your viveka, use your buddhi, have some yukti in the way you actually handle these issues. I must have done at least 500 to 550 public engagements since 2016. Pull anything out from anything that I've said, whether out of context or with context. Ask yourself how much of it is within the bounds of the law. 100% of it is within the bounds of the law. So are you saying that everybody has to become a lawyer? No, I'm just saying everybody has to just be a bit smarter. Okay. That you realize the consequences of what you're saying, and you realize that the state will not come to protect you when you're under attack. You are responsible for the protection and safety of your own families first, nobody else. So don't shut up. There are two ways. Either start with a negative narrative or you start with a positive narrative. Today what is needed is not, let's say, the constant bashing of the other, but a clearer understanding of the self. Because once you have a clearer understanding of the self as to what is Hindu Dharma, what is a community, you'll be in a much better position to respond to the other side. So try and invest in creating a positive narrative in the first place. That's what I would do. Yeah.
Namaste, Saiji.
Namaste.
This is Prathamesh Naik, engineer becoming lawyer,
Ji.
just like you.
Okay.
And talking about peaceful surroundings around Nasik, we see a lot of aggression youth at that side of district,
right,
and lack of aggression in this side. Even when it comes to protect our culture, our religion, our deities,
right,
whatever it is. So what has led us to lose that Kshatriya Dharma, that essence of Kshatriya Dharma in our youth, and how can we restore it in near future or in today's era?
The practicing Hindu's tendency to run down organizations like the Bajrang Dal is a standing example. I don't see why you have to actually criticize these organizations. If you're saying, "Arey ye karte hain, wo karte hain," okay, you tell them how to be better. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say they shouldn't exist at all. You want them to be super sophisticated, super sensitive, super secular, super liberal, and also protect you on the ground. What are you expecting, man? Are they supermen? How do you deal with the person on the other side by being all of this? You need a certain degree of crudeness to be able to do what needs to be done. You won't do it, and you'll cast all your middle class expectations on that fellow also. Are? So the thing is, find a way to support these families. Find a way to give them employment so that they have the confidence that they're not fighting a lone battle. I would always say you only need clusters of these 3 or 4 people in every region. Ground activists, intellectuals to defend what they do, lawyers to defend them in court, and if possible, people from the establishment who have the guts and the conviction or maybe incentive to support you. The job is done. Everywhere the job is done. Yes. Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram. Take the mic, ma'am, if possible, because I think it's for posterity, so that I can be caught with something I say.
Thank you for the mic. Otherwise, I would have asked this question without mic also.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Sir, thank you for coming to Nashik. We all are fan of yours. While speaking, you were informing that we should go back to ritualistic studies and also Vedas.
Right.
This era is going to be, next era is going to be era of AI. And also climate change technologies are coming. To become our nation first, our youth and everybody also has to concentrate on this part also.
Correct.
Studies of Vedas is itself going to take a lot of time.
Right.
In this, how would you advise our youngsters to make a confluence of studies of Vedas as well as bringing our nation first through technology?
I wouldn't say start with the study of Vedas, क्योंकि उसके लिए एक level of commitment भी चाहिए होता है. So I didn't say that. What I'm saying is practice of the dharma and study of the Vedas are 2 different things. Those who have the ability and the commitment to do it can do it. It's not as if I'm Vedically trained. My training is just about begun. My Upanayan Sanskar happened in my 20s. And my study of the Vedas has started in my mid-30s. So where is the comparison? Most people finish at least 2 Vedas by this time. At least 2 shakas are done by this time. So I am also a latecomer. What is important is having your practice, which is your daily routine, which creates a certain sense of discipline. And you know exactly what is it that you're standing up for. Okay? That need not be the study of the Vedas. It can be creating a personal relationship with a particular deity, or being initiated into a particular kind of sadhana, whatever it may be. So if ultimately it is written in your destiny that you will go down the path of the study of Vedas, it can't be decided, niyati mein hai to hai, wo apne aap ho jayega. That can't be changed. But the minimum that you can do in terms of free will exercise is basic commitment to a daily routine, which cannot or should not take more than 50-20 minutes. But the thing is, it should be a non-negotiable, so much so that just as you brush, just as you eat, it's part of what we call the Nitya Karma period. It has to be practiced, whatever it may be. That's it.